Okay, welcome to another edition of Fist on Chin on the Caddick Sports Network. My name is Chris Sarda. Over here is Afshin Hayat, and we are going to talk Thursday morning MMA. So we got deep into the welterweight division last week. We do have some news on the welterweights, but also we are going to cover UFC. I don't even know what it is, but it's Curtis Blaydes versus Derek Lewis.
Yep.
And we're going to cover that. It is a weaker card, but at least it's not a pay-per-view like last week. But before we get into that, let's talk the hottest name in MMA ever. I don't think that's arguable. I was thinking maybe Ronda Rousey, but hottest name in MMA ever, Conor McGregor.
Yep.
Somehow, some way, I suspect it involves money. We are going to get an immediate rematch, most likely between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, and that comes from the mouth of the man himself,
Dana White.
Yeah,
that's what he's saying. They give him these questions, and that's basically what he's leaning towards, which brings up an interesting idea, because the truth of the matter is that, in the past when McGregor has lost, they tried to give him at least a winnable fight, and it still is winnable against Poirier. It was competitive. The first round was really competitive, but man, if he loses this fight, this is devastating, and he probably will not bounce back from this. He'd be probably relegated to Diaz rematch and a couple selected fights, and then that's pretty much the end of the road. His stock is hurting bad right now.
The stock is hurting bad, but I mean, you think it's the end of him? It's not just the end of just sending him to big fights? Because then if he gets smaller fights, he gets. Conor's so hard for me because I don't believe it's over, until I see a Conor that's working, fighting twice a year at least, preferably 3 times, but twice a year at least once every 5 months kind of thing.
What's at risk then if he loses this fight?
Well, listen, I agree with you. He'd be relegated. There might be the Diaz fight out there, and then there'll be, hopefully he doesn't lose that. And then there's going to be just smaller fights. I mean, he's going to be probably out of the top 5, but he's still going to be a main event guy, and at least a main event on ABC or something like that. They started putting him on ABC recently. So he's still going to be that guy to some extent. Stock is definitely hurting, but you think it's the end of the road. I think that if that happens, he's on UFC, on ABC fighting, someone between 5 and 10, and he's more active. You don't think that he'll be able, he'll rise in the ranks?
He's not climbing the rankings again.
After that, you don't think that? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I just want to see active Conor.
That's what I want to see too.
Yeah, active, hungry Conor. And even if he loses to Poirier, I think we just get the better chance that he gets active. Because then the UFC is not trying to hold him back, waiting for the huge pay-per-view fight or waiting to be able to fill an arena or something,
Yeah, there's a baggage that comes with him. There's a baggage that comes with a Conor fight. And that's why he's sat out multiple times. That's why he has retired multiple times. And the reality is that in the fight game, that if you want to command the audience or have a seat at the table or be that larger than life figure, performances have to be there. Conor lost a fight in 2016, lost a boxing match 2017, MMA fight 2018, MMA fight 2021.
So let's I mean, the focus is always somewhat on Conor McGregor, but let's move off of Conor's career and let's think about this fight.
Sure.
I mean, can you, aside from its money and its Conor, can you make any argument for this fight? And also, can you just, what are your thoughts on it most likely not being for the belt also?
Right. Sucks for Dustin Poirier that it's not a title fight. He really wants that. In terms of it, justification for the fight is, from a sporting perspective, is a little bit tough to justify. Although you see stuff like that sometimes. It was competitive. It will be a good fight. Is it winnable for Conor? I'll tell you. My research on automatic rematches doesn't usually look good for the guy who just lost, especially losing by finish with a turnaround 6 months later. Their confidence is always an issue. I think Conor is one of those guys whose confidence, he lives and dies by his confidence.
The automatic rematches off the top of my head are Stipe and Cormier, which worked out for Stipe. And then wasn't Junior Dos Santos and Kane an immediate rematch?
No, they had fights in the middle. I'll tell you. Okay. Yeah, I'll tell you a couple of rematches where they worked out and where they didn't. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, all three of the Kane Dos Santos fights, those had fights in between them.
They did. Kane kept beating Bigfoot Silva in between, and Dos Santos had some wins in the middle
and
too.
Beating what's that big Wisconsin guy? I like him.
Rothwell.
Yeah, I think Rothwell got beat by.
Oh man.
Well, maybe not because I can't remember. For some reason, I just forget all those fights in the middle. I thought Kane Dos Santos 2 and 3 were right after each other, but I guess
that's okay. You're not far off. Let me give you a couple examples of just in title fights or major fights where automatic rematches happen. You have Andrei Arlovsky fought Tim Sylvia, the third fight right after he lost the second. Pretty one-sided third fight. BJ Penn lost to Frankie Edgar. Edgar lost to Ben Henderson. Shogun Rua defeated Machida in their rematch. Anderson Silva lost to Weidman. Worse the second time, not just because of the injury. Randy Couture beat Vitor Belfort after the fluke loss. There's a couple more. Aldo Holloway.
Yeah, each one of those has a little bit of a story, though. A lot of those.
They all do.
Yeah. And BJ Penn, I think BJ Penn's losing of the lightweight to Frankie Edgar. In my mind, I think that's a line to, in my head, it's a line to where like the old ended. I can also say Shogun losing to Jon Jones, but those are sort of in the same, more or less the same time. Like, that's the line where the old MMA that I used to buy in VHS, those guys were done, and new MMA where you trained MMA, happened right there in those little months right there. And you were right, by the way. You're right. He fought Junior Dos Santos and then Bigfoot and then Junior Dos Santos and then Bigfoot again. That was funny.
They're like, Bigfoot, you got murdered in 2 minutes. You ready for your rematch?
Yeah, that's hilarious. You think we would get bored of that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so the rematch. It's a money thing. Poirier was calling him out again, right after. You know what I mean? Within seconds, he was calling him out again. So I guess you want to fight Conor. I wonder what Poirier would say though if it was like, well, we'll give you Gaethje for the belt, or we'll give you Conor. What would he say? He'd probably say Gaethje for the belt, then Conor afterwards, right?
He's a true fighter. He's also a businessman on the side. He talks about his business career afterwards, and he knows that he doesn't need the Conor fight right now because it'll be there. It's probably better for both of them, business-wise. Again, I know we want to get off that, but business-wise, it makes sense for them not to do it because that's the UFC kind of cashing in on the marketability before Conor falls off, not taking any risks. But man, there's a lot at stake there. It would look a lot better if, maybe they should have Conor fight the winner of Poirier's next title fight. But again, I from a sporting perspective, it'll be pretty good. I think Conor would have to come at him hard, fast. Don't let Poirier settle. I think it's winnable, but I question where he's at mentally after the first KO loss of his career.
Yeah, well, KO losses, and I think the other thing to point out is that in the time that Conor's been gone, outside the Cowboy fight, like if you take out the Cowboy fight since the fight before, that calf kick has really taken a hold in the UFC, and right. He's gonna have to do something about that big stance, I think. So, and Conor can adjust. I think he can do something about that big stance, but he really felt those, and I don't even think those aren't even the worst calf kicks I've ever seen. But he looked pretty bad, you know.
He didn't take them well. Poirier was like he's blocking them incorrectly. So
yeah,
I'm going back to the well.
Yeah, and what's sad is that there's just so many good fights for Conor that I would like to see him either fights that are get back on your horse fights like Dos Anjos or
Diego Sanchez money fight.
Yeah, that would be good. Or like who really doesn't have it anymore? Conor versus Ferguson. Like
oh man,
who really doesn't have it? You know what I mean? That'd be a great fight too.
God, isn't it always ironic when you get like fights everyone wants to see, but long after they should have? Like Tito fights Chuck, and they're both coming off losses.
Yeah, I remember the Couture fights where Couture and both of them were a long time. Well, Tito and Chuck, that was like at least. I mean, Tito or Chuck at least was a champion after that. Tito wasn't so much, but.
I mean, when they fought the first time, dude, they were both coming off losses to Couture. It was like, who is going to be the next guy, you know? But then you eventually, but that's what I'm saying. Like they were trying to make it 2002, 2003. It couldn't happen. And this happens periodically in the sport for whatever reason. What I will say is I commend Conor for, he doesn't always pick the safe fights. He's not like Mayweather, where he's being very careful. He's a fighter through and through. Not that Mayweather isn't, but I'm just saying, speaking to Conor, he really wants to be remembered for being a fighter and taking on all comers, and he proves that by taking this automatic rematch.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but makes sense for Poirier's at least short-term pocketbook. And Mayweather did fight good fighters. He fought a lot of good fighters.
I know, but you know what I'm saying. The last 5 years,
he didn't fight Pacquiao, and that's from both of their faults. So, but anyway, let's get we talked a lot of welterweight. You know, right after the welterweight championship gets on the line, we talk a lot of welterweight. Yeah. But I do want to bring this up. So Colby Covington, and I'm going to read the quote here in a second, is. I don't know if I should call it ducking, Afshin. I don't know if I should call it ducking or if I don't know if I should call it a good business decision. But he's basically refusing the fight publicly against Leon Edwards. And let me read his quote before we talk about what Dana White said here. Sure. This says he was interviewed on Submission Radio, and this is Sure Dog's transcription. He calls him Leon Scott. So Leon Scott hasn't earned anything. I'm in the Colby Covington Incorporated championship business. I'm not in the Leon Scott charity business. This isn't charity hour, man. I'm fighting at the top of the mountain. I'm fighting the best in the world. It sounds like Charles Manson. It sounds like Charles.
Someone just ripped the ears off my head, so I don't have to tolerate this. This is awful.
There's more. That was only half of it. I'm not doing charity business no more. It's not my fault this kid hasn't fought in 2 years. It's not my fault this kid. There's people from England fighting all the time in the pandemic. They're not scared to fight. So I'm not doing charity for this guy who hasn't fought in 2 years. He's irrelevant. He beat a bunch of bums, and I'm not doing charity. It's almost done. This isn't charity hour. This is fucking championship hour, fucking pay-per-view hour. So listen, I was on board. I mean, I'm not on board. I want to see them fight, but I was on board with the logic for the reason I read that whole thing. The logic through that whole thing, okay, maybe that's what you think. But then the last sentence, this isn't charity hour, this is effing championship, effing pay-per-view hour. So it may not be a pay-per-view, but from just like from the mouth of the man himself, just like we know that Poirier and Conor are going to fight. Dana White said in the scrum for UFC 258 that this would probably be the eliminator for the title fight. So this is how you get it, Colby. This is how you get it.
There's a big but here. Did you hear when the fight is offered for? March 13th. So that Leon can stay on his schedule. So that's there's always like when guys come
before and Colby's won.
I know.
And it's really it's only Usman right now in my head. Right now in my head, the closest guy to Usman, I'm not a Colby Covington fan at all. Although the name of the channel is Chaotic Sports, but that's, he stole it from us.
He is chaotic, sure.
Yeah. Chaos is his middle name, right? Is his his nickname. But I do think Colby Covington is the second best today. I think he's the second best.
That's fair. I mean,
yeah, I want to see him fight Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards can prove that me wrong. You know what I mean? But the truth is, Leon Edwards, the people that he has his W's against aren't that impressive. Yeah, I think
his streak is tough. It's one of those guys. His streak is basically building from the bottom rung, and then it shows you where you can get to if you get 6, 7, 8 wins. Same as what Ferguson or Khabib did during their 12-fight streaks. You start at the bottom rung, and then you work your way up to championship, caliber. And
those guys are always. They have to fight 3 more Euro card fights than anyone else does. You know what I mean? Those guys are always. Khabib was the same way, and then Leon Edwards, is probably one of the better guys one of the better guys out of England. So he's on every German card, every England card. You know what I mean? He was on the foreign cards mostly. And people didn't even know who he was. People barely knew who he was until he started an argument with Masvidal, right?
It's look, that unquestionably is a good fight. It sounds to me like Colby is not interested in a high risk fight. I think the opportunity when he did that against like Lawler 2 years ago, I think that was a good opportunity for him. Knowing that Lawler was like 36, 37, he's essentially saying, like, if I'm going to take a dangerous short notice fight, I'd rather be against an older dude with a lot of footage of his losses versus like a young guy who's on a layoff, who's probably still in his athletic prime.
So you think the reason is the short turnaround?
Yeah.
I think it's more that he thinks that he can get the next Usman fight without another fight in between.
That's possible. I mean, you remember he was calling for it after he lost the fight to begin with, and he really didn't even want the Woodley fight after Woodley lost last year to Burns. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, most guys, if they have the option, the UFC doesn't like to do that anymore and say you've got to this Burns situation we talked about was rare. They like to say, you've got the title fight when you come back. If they now say, like, look, if you're going to sit out, if it's convenient, we'll give it to you, but nothing's promised. So, but I agree, it would be a good fight. Leon Edwards just needs a fight. I mean, he's spamming it to everyone. It looked like he was thumbing through the rankings of 2 divisions, being like, fight me, fight me, fight me, fight me.
We were mentioning Stephen Thompson a lot last time, but it turns out he's injured. I don't think either one of us realized he was injured.
No, I touched on it. I was saying if he wasn't injured, it's his thigh, I'm sure, or his quad.
Yeah. So, I mean, I hope he was on Ariel Helwani's show, and that he looks like he's hungry to fight. Like, it's one of those things where I think he was okay with missing his original fight, the one that got canceled in January, was okay with not getting it. You know what I mean? And now it's been 2 years. He just wants to get out there. So I feel for the guy. Like, COVID's really hit his career. Not just from him getting it, but also his opponent getting it and continuing to have those. So, I think he just wants to get in, put him against, anyone. I think he'll fight someone out of the top 15, to be honest.
Frankly, it's ironic that 6 months ago he was like picking and choosing who he wanted to fight in the top 5. And now multiple fights fall through multiple times. Just get the guy a fight. I'm not his biggest fan, but as a guy who follows the sport and likes fighters to be able to fight and show us something, the guy needs to knock that rust off. Give him a fight. Yeah. I mean, he deserves it at this point.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Yeah. Okay. Those were the, top 2 news items.
That's right.
We'll weigh it out. We'll see how much news is. The news is fun to talk about, to be honest.
Definitely.
So we'll continue doing news at the beginning of the show. Now we're gonna start talking about this card, which is,
it has 4 names. You pick any of them.
Yeah, UFC
185.
185 in Vegas, 13 ESPN Plus. Anyway, let's call it Fight Night Blaydes versus Lewis. That's what I'm going with.
Deal.
Man, there's been 43 cards on ESPN already. It feels like just yesterday they switched over.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it. So let's start. Yeah, we're going to mostly talk about the main event.
Dive right into that. Tell me.
Some like semi-interesting stuff or semi-interesting fighters fighting out there or little storylines, but mostly this is about the main event. Curtis Blaydes, who I don't even think people realize I think people like confuse him with Walt Harris sometimes, to be honest. But Curtis Blaydes is on a little win streak here. Derek Lewis is quite possibly the most dangerous guy in the UFC as far as like could knock out anyone if he connected.
Lots of comebacks.
Great comebacks too. I mean, and I want to just go on record that I think Derek Lewis is my favorite fighter.
I put him up there for me too. One of the luckiest fighters of all time. His record is insanely deceptive because you see a lot of guys like Masvidal with a bunch of split decision losses. This guy, every time he had a loss headed his way, he stole it in the third round. I mean, he turned 3 losses into victories.
Yeah, I mean, because he never stopped being dangerous. You know what I mean? I was actually really surprised. I thought he would actually get Dos Santos a few years back. Was not surprised that Daniel Cormier would beat him, and obviously I think Daniel Cormier would beat him today, and I think that's really pertinent for just the high level of this fight because while Curtis Blaydes is no Daniel Cormier, he is a wrestler and he's bigger than Daniel Cormier. So does Derek Lewis have any hope here outside of that third round knockout?
Before I jump into that, you mentioned you were thinking that he would get Dos Santos. You realize both these guys have fought Junior Dos Santos, right?
No. I said not get him like he would fight. I mean, Dos Santos has been losing and he's not in there. I said I thought that Derek Lewis has a loss against Dos Santos. That fight from a couple years ago, I thought that I was pretty sure he would beat Dos Santos and he didn't.
Oh, okay. Got you. You get him that way. Sorry.
Yeah. Apologies.
No, that's okay. Okay, so for starters, I'll talk about what we've seen and how his chances are in that realm. But there's also an intangible because I haven't seen what he looks like lately, and that there's something very important there. So for starters, this fight could easily play out how Cormier Lewis played out. Although, Blaydes hasn't shown the submission game that Cormier, had, that he rarely used, but had. But this should be clinching and takedowns. This guy is huge. Blaydes is huge. I've seen him in person. He's one of those guys that's bigger in person. Most guys are smaller. This guy's bigger. He's like 6'4" and 260. Derek Lewis, I have not seen him in person, but I imagine he's similar. He's like 6'3" himself, and he usually cuts to the heavyweight limit. Last time he fought, he said he did not want to fight again until he shaved off 20 pounds. I don't know if you've seen what he looked like before the UFC, but it's like he went through a round of chemo or something. He was 20 pounds, 30 pounds lighter. So if he did that, I've heard him say that a few times. I don't think he will have shaved off 20 pounds and come in at 245. But assuming he comes in the way he is, I love him. It's hard to pick against him, but I would say Blaydes has only really lost to Ngannou, and Ngannou just doesn't fear his takedowns. We've seen multiple people, Ilir Latifi, Daniel Cormier, Volkov, I think, not only take down Derek Lewis, but also I was thinking about this, and Derek Lewis doesn't like hide pain very well. He shows it, especially soft to the body, and
especially belly shots. So you'd think with the extra padding that would help, but some guys are just take it to the body and they show it. Matt Brown is like that too. So long story long, it's either Lewis catches him or like a flying knee, a punch, something like that, or he's going to get taken down and smothered. What do you think? Do you see it the same way? Do you give him better chances? I see it exactly the same way. I think it's like probably a bad bet. I actually have the odds here.
They're insanely inflated.
Yeah. Where'd they go? Where'd you go? Oh, no, it's not a bad bet. I mean,
minus 400, minus 450?
Yeah, if you're going to get plus 350. So the reason I thought it would be a little bit closer, the reason is that I see it exactly the way you do, that it's going to be, like a heavy wrestling match, hold them down, Without the submission that Cormier had, but I almost forgot about that submission because I remember most of the fight was just him holding him down, right?
Yeah, glued to him, right?
If you get plus 350, don't bet your mortgage payment on it, but
right. But it could be worth a little something.
Yeah, if you get plus 350, Derek Lewis is, you just said he's he's 6'3" and cuts down to the weight. Derek Lewis is the guy that can legitimately throw a flying knee at that huge weight. You know what I mean? So
let me feed what the direction you're going with this.
Yeah.
Grapplers don't typically beat this guy, and he has the most finishes in heavyweight history. So I agree with you. If you're feeling froggy, throw a little bit of money.
You got a couple beers on you and you got that app open. Put 20 on it. But make sure you only put 20 on it. Don't put the extra 0.
Yeah, right?
Much, you know what I mean? Just put your $10 on it or something like that.
Sure, something small.
Yeah. I didn't realize there was that much of a gap. I thought it was going to be more like, 200 or something like that.
It opened at +3. It opened at -300 when the fight was announced for Curtis Blaydes, and now it's in the -450 area. So I think the public kind of sees this as a relatively simple fight to pick as well, just style versus style.
And it definitely is, except that what we pointed out is that Derek Lewis somehow figures it out.
Intangibles, yeah, he does.
A lot of guys. And he's great. And also Derek Lewis
got tired. Yeah, Blaydes got tired last time too against Volkov, holding down a dude who's big, who's heavy, who's squirrely, tired him out big time. That's an intangible too.
And also Derek Lewis is not a dummy. I know he has that like low stage, you know what I mean?
Like then he gives on.
Yeah, he's not stupid, so he knows what Curtis Blaydes is gonna do. Curtis Blaydes tells everyone what he's gonna do. So Derek Lewis, he could train. He might have something somewhat surprising for us. Maybe if he has an iota better takedown defense, then that increases the chances of him. That increases the chance of him catching him on a scramble or something. You know what I mean? So I think we see the fight in the same way. Derek Lewis is just such a random, just a wild card. You know what I mean? Like he had no business fighting Cormier actually, because that Volkov fight, was one of the fights he won at the end, right?
It was.
So let's move on. There's not much more technical we could talk about there, but let's move on to the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
Because I think if Blaydes wins today, he deserves the title shot. Is there even a question about that?
I mean, you could argue that he deserves the title shot already, even without this win. He only has losses to Ngannou, and if Ngannou loses to Stipe, it makes a greater case for him to get the title shot. Although I think it's pretty much, decided that no matter what he does in this fight, he's not getting the title shot because of Bones Jones. But given, well, of course, you forget that he's a heavyweight because he hasn't fought there yet. But it seems that he's jumping the line. But yeah, of course, Blaydes, he deserves a title shot. A little harder sell if Ngannou wins, and even if Jones wasn't there, because he has two quick dominant wins, both quick, but two dominant wins over Blaydes. So, but given how his career has progressed, he deserves it.
So I do want to talk about the Jon Jones thing that was actually in my notes. I just read it. I forgot it now, but what I was going to bring up too, though, is if Ngannou wins, Ngannou does have 2 wins against him, but they were a long time ago, and Blaydes keeps looking like he looks better, as good as you can look for a wrestler. You know what I mean? But
he won a stand-up fight. He won a stand-up fight against Dos Santos, which, yes, that victory doesn't get sweeter with age, but given his style to do that, when he did it, it was still a big deal.
Yeah, I give it. So assuming Jon Jones wasn't there, gets injured, I don't think it's a bad sell for Ngannou and Blaydes. I mean, they,
I do.
Ngannou, look, what is it? Like, I don't even think it was 19. It was 2018.
That was the most recent one, end of 18. That was the year that Ngannou was coming off the Overeem win, fights Stipe, loses, then he fights a stinker against Lewis, then he's a major dog against Blaydes at the end of the year in the rematch murders him, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Ngannou is good. He's a good shot." Yeah.
Well, that fight was also in China too. So I'm going to give I would give Curtis Blaydes the benefit of the doubt personally,
Okay.
and assuming Jon Jones was there, I would say that he should even get it against Ngannou. I mean,
You'd be a very good matchmaker. I don't care how many times you've lost him. You get another shot.
Yeah, you already know how I feel about that.
He was in China last time. Fight him in America.
But I mean, who else is there though after that?
I know.
Mean, Stipe would get a rematch maybe before.
Perfect segue into talking about the heavyweight division, what they like to call the premier division in MMA and in fighting. But in MMA, man, it's tough. It's tough finding good heavyweights. There are guys in this UFC top 15 that are well into their 40s. Two of them are fighting on this card. Oleinik is fighting. It looks like Arlovsky was bounced from the rankings, but you know that he was probably number 15 not too recently. You just have these guys. You've got Overeem. He's 40. He just fought, lost to Volkov. The average age in this division, I know. The average age in this division is significantly higher than the next closest division. So
even USA Today, even the MMA Junkie rankings have Overeem at 7 above Gane.
Just only because he's unproven. That guy beats Rosenstruck, and then they both will be ahead of Overeem.
Yeah. So I mean the heavyweight division is heavy, you know, and to be honest,
heavy with old guys.
To be honest, until like the last couple of years, boxing heavyweights were terrible.
Yes,
over almost decades. So, but hey, Curtis Blaydes. I mean, I think he should get it. I think you should just, if you're the top guy, I think you should just get the chat. We've talked about this. I have a different, I think of these fights as like
sportative. You're sportative.
Tournaments.
Right. Meritocracy. I make it. I mean, I agree.
Yeah.
The division also, let's be honest, between Blaydes and Lewis, they've beaten most of the top 15 between the two of them. They both have wins over Volkov. They both have fought Dos Santos. I would argue that Lewis would probably beat Dos Santos at this point. He had a weird injury there, and it wasn't a great performance for him. It seemed like an off night, and Blaydes blew him out of the water, and Dos Santos is just fading. He's like Arlovsky. He's just going downward trajectory. So
Tyron Woodley. Okay, let me give you a scenario. Okay. One piece of this scenario is going to sound really detailed, but it's actually important.
All right.
And it's actually super unlikely, to be honest.
Dive down the rabbit hole with you. Bring it.
Yeah. Ngannou wins by decision. So that's very unlikely.
Stipe?
Ngannou against Stipe. Ngannou wins by decision. Okay. And then Curtis Blaydes also wins.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Still Jon Jones no matter what. Stipe doesn't get a rematch.
No way. I don't see it. They barely gave it to Stipe in 2019 after coming off that 2-minute loss. They did not want to give it to him. It was heavyweight division, folks. He has a name, and there was no one else. Yeah. So the timing was good. But this time, Jones played.
I mean, a knockout, that's just a great fight. Ngannou versus Jon Jones. That's just, I mean, I'm getting excited thinking about that fight. So if Ngannou knocks him out, that's for sure. If Stipe knocks out Ngannou, then Stipe versus Jon Jones is for sure. Right?
I'll tell you what I think. And I apologize if you were in mid-thought there. This is the scenario. The scenarios you're talking about involve 4 guys. Possibly Lewis instead of Blaydes. But the way it's looking now, based on rankings and based on what is going to happen, it's Miocic versus Ngannou. Winner gets Jones. And if Miocic loses against Ngannou, decision or other, he either fights the winner of this weekend's heavyweight fight, or he gets the match after those guys settle their business. That's what I think. I mean, it's not like welterweight or lightweight where you've got 10 guys who could be champ on any day.
Yeah.
It's like very few storylines. I mean, that's why they have cards where there are no heavyweight fights, which I notice that. It bothers me.
So I'll say this though, because you're right? You only have so many fights, and you're gonna have to repeat fights, right? At some point, Blaydes and Ngannou are gonna fight again. They just have to. It's at some point. It may not be for a championship. It's gonna happen, right? But that's what interests me though about about bringing Jon Jones and giving him a championship fight right away. Like you've got 2 pay-per-views. Like I know he could lose against Ngannou or whatever. You put him up against one of those guys in the top 5. And make it legitimate, although if he wins the championship, it doesn't matter. This same thing happened with Bader, right? I thought it was too early. He went and beat Shogun, and then I was like, okay, well, he beat Shogun. So I thought it was too early, but he still beat Shogun. So you get 2 pay-per-views though.
Risky business. Look what they're doing with look at what we talked about with Conor and Poirier. No better time than now. Don't risk messing with the ingredients of the soup if it's going to be a good soup. It makes sense to give Jones. I mean, if Jones loses, who can they put him against that will get, that will bounce off of Jones? There's no one there. If there was some sort of streaking Dominic Reyes undefeated type heavyweight, then I think they would consider that. But do you want to give it to Cyril Gane? Do you want to give it to Alexander Volkov, the shine from beating Jones?
Yeah. And then also the timing works out too, right? Because you got this fight happening this weekend, and then Stipe versus Francis is March 27th. So it's not like you can give Jones one of these 4 guys either. You can't, if you're going to do that pre-Jones fight, or Jones has to win before he gets a championship fight, it would likely be against one of these 4 guys, and these guys are literally fighting right now. So it would push fights way far down, So
unless these guys all come out like the winners of these fights this weekend, and then the heavyweight title fight next month, unless the winners all come out injured, Jones is going to wait 5 months to fight for the title. At the earliest, he's fighting 5 months. Otherwise, he might just do what Leon Edwards is saying, please give me a fight. I can't be benched for that long. He's been benched for a year at this point.
He's been benched a long time.
More information for you. Miocic has fought once a year since 2018, since his title fight 2018 in the summer that he lost. Since then, 1 a year. Is he going to bounce back quickly and fight end of March and then July? Oof, that's asking a lot.
Yeah, they would have to give him a lot. So let's talk Jones against every one of these guys. So I think he does the easiest against Derek Lewis. I think Derek Lewis is the same. I don't know if you disagree or have something else to add, go ahead and add it. But I'll start with Derek Lewis since he's number 4 on that list for sure. It's Derek Lewis the same thing. Does he catch him? But Jones has, against Derek Lewis, he has reach. Okay. What about Jones versus, if you have something to add, you can jump in there, but I think that one's simple because it's Derek Lewis is the same with everyone. He has a chance against everyone. What about Jones versus Curtis Blaydes?
It would be interesting, right? I mean, it's very interesting because we don't know exactly what we're going to get with Jon Jones at heavyweight. Is he going to show up at 250 like some of his previous opponents have shown up in heavyweight? I really don't think he should put on 25% body weight and just assume he's going to work the same way he did. Even 240. We've talked about this off camera. He should be like 230 when he shows up here. 225, 230. I would hope. I hope it's just he doesn't cut weight. He's adding muscle, so you can add 5 or 10 pounds there probably. But
I think that's the plan.
If he does that and he does it correctly, the way Couture used to do it, I would say against Blaydes, he's got to keep Blaydes at range, work the clinch. I think he has a much better clinch than Blaydes. Blaydes is old school. He's shooting double legs on people. I mean, that doesn't even work in half these other divisions. And
Jon Jones is a Greco guy too, so that clinch above the waist stuff. So I think he's Greco.
And I think he's going to be surprisingly strong. I do think that his first fight will not be indicative of everything that he brings to the division because he's going to have to learn to grow in. He's going to be growing into his 33, 34-year-old frame. But I like the matchup with Blaydes in that I think he's a better striker. I think that Blaydes is more primitive at striking, which is not going to open up his grappling. I think Jones could even submit him.
So Jones didn't he won, arguably lost, but he didn't look good against a guy with heavy hands at 205.
Reyes, you're talking?
Huh?
You talking about Reyes?
Yeah. So he didn't look great against a guy with heavy hands at 205. Some people think
Yeah.
he lost that fight, of course.
Yeah.
I think I had him winning it, but I think I had rounds where I wasn't sure.
There were some close
so
rounds. It was too close for comfort, some of those rounds.
Yeah. So Jones against Ngannou now with a guy that's taller than him, probably
The worst matchup in the division for him.
Yeah, and probably is real close to the same reach. I think Jones might have still bigger reach than him, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah. The thing with Jones is that he's been getting hit more and more his last couple fights. When you go to heavyweight, it's going to make a difference. He doesn't know. There's an uncertainty factor about getting hit with these guys who now in the top 4, they all have one punch KO power pretty much.
Yeah.
Blaydes not necessarily, but it didn't take too many to put Dos Santos away. Put him away early in the second. So he's shown that if he connects, it's there. They're all like that. So with that being the case, I hate the matchup against Ngannou. Some people think, based on how Ngannou got out-wrestled a couple years ago against Miocic, that it would be a terrible matchup for him. No. There's a reason why he hasn't been close to taken down since then. There's a reason why in the rematch against Curtis Blaydes later that year, Blaydes only got as close as his hands on Ngannou because he adjusted his stance and his hips so that he could strike. I think it's a terrible matchup for Jones. I'm dying to see it.
Yeah, I think it goes to the. I don't know. I don't think it does. I would hope that Jones uses his wrestling in that fight. I
know he'll be able to do it.
I think we did hit on a thing that we've talked about in the past. That I'm a little bit less impressed. I'm not proven that Ngannou's takedown defense has gotten that much better. And it was because I just don't believe you have the Blaydes fight, but that was, he caught him. So we didn't see it over a long period. And then after that,
he fell apart.
Yeah. After that, it's Kane, who is, he fell apart worse than Dos Santos.
He probably shouldn't take the fight. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Rosenstruck. So, he has those bad fights against Stipe and Derek Lewis. So he beat Curtis Blaydes, but he beat him in, what was that? Like in a minute.
Yeah.
And then you have Kane, Dos Santos, and Rosenstruck, which weren't, you know what I mean? Aren't.
No, those guys, none of them attempted takedowns. I hear what you're saying. He hasn't proven he has the takedown defense. He's just shown little glimpses of not being so rigid and stuck in his stance.
Yeah.
But I really want to
see it in the stance. You see it a little bit in the stance.
I see it in the stance. I haven't had to see him put it into practice because, as you know, when people get desperate or the pressure is on and the stress comes out, their old habits come out. It happens to everyone.
Does Stipe use the ground
against Jones?
No. I'm switching back to Stipe. Yeah, Stipe gonna wrestle.
If he's smart, he should, right?
I agree.
Would say so. Yeah, I mean, the difference is that Stipe, they're both 3 years older now, and people's chins as they get to 40 don't get harder or better.
Yeah, and Ngannou had the most room to grow, which he arguably did. You know what I mean? And you see him on, he's one of those guys where you see him get interviewed. He had a long interview on Joe Rogan a couple weeks ago. You see a hungry guy. You know what I mean? Like you don't realize that the guy was a sponge too. This guy's being a sponge right now. He's just a massive athletic guy that's learned a whole bunch and see if he can make those adjustments. A lot of people before Stipe beat him and he had a lot of people thought that this is the guy that's going to be the champion for years to come. You know what I mean? And it didn't work out that way. It's still possible.
I'll tell you
wrestling a little more.
I'll say it right now and then I'll get back on topic. What we're going to see here, we've already seen before. Chuck Liddell was supposed to beat Couture, lost, came back in the rematch after a couple fights, showing that he knew what he was getting himself into the second time and killed him. I think Ngannou will do the same against Stipe. I don't think it'll be close. I don't think it'll be close.
So we're gonna get way deeper into that, obviously, because that's
can't wait. Clearly,
I didn't realize that you felt that strongly about it. But let's go on now. Let's go on now to Jones versus Stipe, which now I think I know your Now I think I know your opinion about this one. Now that I hear what you think Ngannou's going to do to Stipe.
I'm not sure I know my opinion here. It's a good fight. It's a better matchup. It's also a tough matchup because Stipe is a bigger version of Jon. Not skill for skill, but he's a tall dude who knows how to wrestle, and he wins and he does a lot of damage with his striking.
Yeah.
So
who's better at counters?
Bones?
Yeah.
I think so. I've seen more counters from him. There's a lot more footage on him.
Stipe just has those knockout counters. So.
He has the knockout counters, right? You're thinking about like when he beat Verdum and a couple other guys.
Backing up, yeah.
So I just don't like Stipe's age going in. He's turned 39 this year. I mean,
okay,
that's tough.
Yeah. I mean, he turned 39 without a lot of tread on the tire, or with plenty of tread on the tires. I think, he doesn't have this long history of knocking out. There's really not a lot of,
ton of damage in each fight. You're right.
Yeah. Not a lot of Stipe bloodbaths. A lot of that is, I hate to fucking say this guy's name, but a lot of that is the Tom Brady effect. Like, how well do you, how well do you take care of yourself in your old age, right? And how focused are you?
And that's what doing. One fight a year the past couple of years, 2 fights in 18, but he's giving himself time off. It's not often in MMA, nor does the UFC like to allow champions or top guys only 1 fight a year.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also like how you take care of yourself. Because Stipe, to me, if I didn't know Stipe was a UFC fighter, I would think he's just a Cleveland guy that pounds a 12-pack of Natural Light every day or something. You know what I mean? Like, sort of like that kind of guy. Like
an everyman type of dude.
Yeah, he looks exactly like he's a firefighter. That commercial I had to watch like 7,000 times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a that's a little bit tougher fight. That's actually a really fun fight. Just talking about this, by the way, for me, Jon Jones going to heavyweight has just been inevitable for a few years now. Like, it was going to happen. But just actually talking about these hypothetical matchups, and we're going to see at least a couple of them, right? Because he's going to, if win or lose, he's going to fight one of these other guys, right?
Yeah.
Is very exciting, and I think Jones,
get the show on the road. Can't wait.
Yeah, and I think Jones, I mean, I take these championship guys that I know like to fight, so Jones and Conor, top billing guys. I take them at their word too a little bit, because I think Jones is right. I think at 205 he was having trouble getting excited for fights, and then they turned out to be closer fights. Because I think he's way better than Reyes. I mean, another guy, Blachowicz knocked Reyes out. I don't think no one picks Blachowicz for anything. Poor guy.
Remember this. I know, and remember this. He's fighting an undefeated dude who didn't have that many fights where you could see a lot of, because he was growing a lot between fights. And it was this is Jones when he fought Reyes. Reyes came in undefeated, growing a lot between fights, almost a complete unknown, because you didn't have 10 fights. You didn't have to watch him bounce back from a loss. You didn't have to go through these wars. He was just climbing the ladder, and then he got to the top. So, of course, you have a little bit of struggle at the beginning, but that's due to nerves. And so when people get past that initial, I'm in the UFC, and they get comfortable, then Reyes just took off, and he killed Weidman in a minute. And it's like, oh, could he do that to Jones? So that was part of it too. He's just not interested at that stage of his career anymore. And I get that. When people get into the kind of second chapter or later into their career, mid-career, they don't want to keep fighting the younger dudes or just whoever's next that doesn't get them excited. The light heavyweight in the UFC has been a little stagnant for a few years. You other than Jones and Cormier, that's 10 years of championship reign right there. Yeah,
and it was, I mean, it's been starting to look better. It's been starting to look a little better. But yeah, definitely not the,
because they both left the division.
Yeah, true. And not the Couture Liddell years. So we're at 45 minutes. Do you have? I know you were talking about there were some maybe not interesting fights, but interesting fighters. Do you want to drop a couple tidbits on those?
Sure. So we did mention that we've got Ketlin Vieira versus Yana Kunitskaya, and I know that's one that you're pretty interested in. You've got two girls who are basically top 5 fighters in the 135-pound division. They treat Ketlin like she's the future. She had a pretty tough loss to Irene Aldana. She bounced back very nicely against Sarge Eubanks, and then you've got Yana, who has a pretty good record in the UFC.
Has a title fight already.
Has a title fight already. So this has, this is going to be a pretty competitive fight in my eyes. It's going to be a good one. They've got Ketlin as minus like 250, minus 260 in there. I think that's probably they're discounting Yana pretty good, but that's how a lot of the fights are sometimes. They have a clear favorite. There's less major upsets in women's MMA, in my opinion. What do you think?
I agree. I'm interested in the fight just because they're close to each other.
It's important for the division too.
Say that again.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They're close to each other, and it's a very important fight for the division.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, why not? I mean, it's not a great, to be honest, not a great, co-main event. Like, what do you do if this Blaydes? I've been seeing that.
Demetrius Johnson fighting on Fight Night again.
Yeah. So, it's not this great. I don't even see him at 135. I could have swore they were like 6 and 7.
Let me see. No, they're got to be there. No. Let me see. Women's.
Oh, I was looking at pound for pound. I'm sorry. Amanda Nunes's name is all over. She's pound for pound. She's bantamweight. She's featherweight. Yeah.
The featherweight division looks real good. A photo of her and no one below her.
Yeah, exactly. So in the UFC rankings, we're looking at, number 6 and 7. So yeah, it's just a good fight. One of them has already had a championship fight. I like Yana still. And then Vieira is the future, but really no one's the future. Amanda Nunes, we just needed Amanda Nunes to fight Valentina again. I want to see that again. I think Valentina won that fight, the last fight.
What weight class? 35?
Yeah, 35. I don't know that. I mean, why not? Like Nunes, I mean, now that you just said that, if Nunes can make 125, why not just why not just go to 115 after that too? You know what I mean? But
you go to Invicta and win the atomweight title too.
Yeah, go to 105.
Multi-organization champion.
To me, the big fight is in that division. I want Nunes to keep, dominating, because that just makes the girls under her better. Like it just rises all ships, but that takes a while. Yes. In my head, Nunes and Valentina is the next fight. I hope Valentina would go up to 135. She seems competitive. I can't remember what she said about that. She may just want to reign at 125, but to me, it seems like she wants that fight back. But that's the fight I want to see, especially since in my head, even though it wasn't a finish, Valentina won clearly to me, counters and controlling that. And it was just that it was too technical for the judges to see that, which is weird because it's, like boxing judges, they should.
I think that happens a lot. I never thought about it that way. I think you're absolutely right. Too technical for the judges.
Yeah. Like the fight starts getting a little maybe boring. And Nunes, that fight was a few years ago, so I can't really remember it. But Nunes, maybe looked like she was controlling the ring, but Valentina is well known to be a counter striker and highly technical. And to me, she was catching her the whole way. And Nunes was hitting a lot of arms and stuff. So yeah, too close to call. That's the fight I really want to see. But I'm not one of those people that, will just completely shit on a division, even heavyweight, and I've legitimately could shit on heavyweight for 2 decades now. But I don't want to like crap on these divisions. I want them to grow. You know what I mean? Yeah. I want these girls to fight a lot. I want to see them grow. We've talked about Juliana Pena. We've talked about, there's a lot of hope here. Aspen Ladd, Holly Holm is going to be a great gatekeeper for a lot of these girls. So there's hope. There's like a little bit of hope here. And that starts with seeing like number 6 and 7 fight each other, now should
that's
this
right.
Be prelim? Yeah, it should be a prelim, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's one of those fights. This is just to move the division forward. What you have in the women's 135-pound division, you've got a champ who's right around her middle of her prime, although there may be some questions about her motivation, but she's showing dominance in her fights, and until Megan Anderson gives her too much trouble, I'm going to say that she's going to be fine, and she'll be waiting for the next person. But then you've got your number 1 and 2, and a few scattered names around the top 10 that are kind of the middle 30s to upper 30s, middle 30s and up. And then you've got these, young fighters, your Aspen Lads, your Ketlin Vieiras, your Yana Kunitskayas that are all like mid-20s to like 30, 31. So, we could be seeing a title eliminator if one of these girls wins by like dominant finish or just shows us something new and gets a finish. That's really what it takes these days.
Yep, sounds good. So I already know your old guy tidbit. We'll get to that on this card.
Sure.
You did. We were mostly planning for the main event, talking about that. You have a nice young up and coming fighter for everyone to look out for.
Yeah, I would honestly say that on this card, young up and comer Eddie Winewood. No, I'm just kidding.
The WEC.
Maybe Drakkar Klose. He's had a couple fights, but he's still around 30 years old, 31 maybe.
He's lost to like Beneil, who we didn't talk about last week.
I know he lost to Beneil. He bounced back. I think there's room for him. He's also young in the sport. And honestly, I would say he's the one I look at the most there as potential. He's been on a few pay-per-view main cards, I believe, and definitely some mid main card fights, for fight nights events like this. So it's a little weird that he's on the preliminary card. I think it's possibly just because he just picked up the fight out of nowhere late notice. Shows you his confidence, though.
Okay. I can't imagine who will be your old guy is still fighting tidbit on this card.
Yeah, I think the two oldest guys, Arlovsky and Alexei Oleinik, should be fighting each other.
Yeah. Oleynik's a journeyman, came in late, from Eastern European card. So leave him alone. Andre Arlovsky.
I love it.
I've known Andre Arlovsky twice as long as I've known my wife, and I've been married. We're married for 13 years. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? 50% longer at least. So he's still going.
Still going. I think at this point he's just happy to be there, and the UFC is obliging him, no longer giving him the Stipes of the world, the Ngannous of the world. Man, he went on a horrible streak of like Stipe, Ngannou, Josh Barnett, and Overeem in a row. 4 strikes in a row. So they've been gradually reducing his level of competition, making him essentially, if you can beat him, you deserve to be here. And if you can't beat him and it's competitive, give you another shot. And he hasn't had a finish in a while, although he beat our man Ben Rothwell in the rematch like 2 years ago. I didn't see that coming. So he still shows flashes of excellence, but I think he turns 42 this month. And I don't like to see guys fighting till they're told to stop, especially when they're moving down the ladder,
And I think this might be I don't know exactly the way contracts always work, especially for specific fighters, but I think he has a contract and the UFC is required to offer so many fights.
And he gets paid handsomely, by the way.
And he gets paid handsomely, so he's gonna take these fights for his $200,000 or whatever it is. You're not going to put him on a pay. Who knows if he has pay-per-view points? Never going to be on a pay-per-view again.
Nope.
If that's the case. And then he's going to live happily ever after with his money that spends like it's $1 million in Belarus. You know what I mean? So
they should call him Belarus.
Yeah, in White Russia, as our wives would call it. And then we'll go visit, our respective families' wives in Poland, and we'll go walk over to the border and say hi, Andre.
I literally watched Arlovsky's first fight in the UFC when I ordered the pay-per-view for UFC 28 in
And
November of my senior year of high school.
it was probably $14. It was like the $14 pay-per-view days,
It
right?
was very cheap, very hard to find. And they were like, ooh, they broke the clinch and he threw a punch. Did you see that high-level skill?
Yeah.
It was impressive back then.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's you've got Eddie Wineland, who for bantamweights is a grandfather, and you've got a lot of guys who have been in the UFC versus guys who are either debuting or 1 or 2 fights in. Your Chaz Skelly's, your Iman Zahabis, and your Sergey Spivaks. They've all had a handful of fights in the UFC compared to their opponents. This is just one of those cards. There's 15 fights on this card. I feel like I'm watching an old Pride card. Are half of these kickboxing? I mean, what is this?
Yeah. Okay, let's cut it off there.
Great.
Thank you very much, Afshin.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
We will be back on, we'll decide how we're going to do it. We'll either be back right after the card or we'll be back Sunday morning for MMA Church. Maybe both. Who knows?
Either way, see our post more.
We didn't talk about a few smaller fights from the last card, so we'll figure that out. Anyway, okay. You can find me at you can find us at Caddick Sports and at Fist on Chin. You can find Afshin right there at Afman Afamazing on Twitter. You can find me other places. We do comic content, also music content on other channels. Those links will be below. And we will see you next time. Wayne, for those of you that watch this, and Angelo are pretty mad that I'm consistent with you and not them. So there'll be a lot more content on this channel for sure because I lit a fire under their ass to do more basketball and football stuff and even baseball. So hey,
get this channel off the ground, baby.
I'm going to be busy. I'm going to be busy, guys. I'll be here and everywhere. So thank you guys very much. We will see you Saturday or Sunday. Later.
Peace.